Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 297. Greta,
Hey.
ahoy, hoy.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Yes,
That's a new one.
yes.
Huh. Ahoy, ahoy to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not quite sure what that means, but same back at you, pal.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
In this episode, we will be discussing Chapter 18 of the Silmarillion, of the coming of the Ruin of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin. Notes snafu there, sorry. Of the Ruin of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin. So, two things happen in this chapter. Beleriand gets ruined, and Fingolfin falls.
Yep. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. All
Yes.
right. Before we get started, we'd like to give a double up air 5 to our patrons. Get them up there. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsh. Boom.
Nice.
Oh, I got my map pulled up here. Let me take that off for a second. We'll get back to that. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, Jacob Lockham, John H., and Scotchy Bobo.
Can't believe we have 5. That's so awesome.
I mean,
Thank you guys.
Can't believe we have all the patrons that we do. It's awesome.
That too.
You know,
Yeah.
They're all amazing, and man, those executive producers, just man, thank you.
Thank you.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, that's it's awesome.
It is.
We really appreciate all of our patrons. Just everybody who provides that support to us and has been doing a lot of them doing it for a very long time. So it's very cool.
It's very awesome. Cool. Yeah. Couldn't do it without you guys. That's for sure.
No, absolutely not. All right. Well, hey, you too can become a part of that distinguished crowd, the crowd of Tolkien Road patrons, by visiting patreon.com/Tolkien Road. Doing so gets you cool perks like 20% off of everything at truemistpress.com. And plus, your financial support helps the Tolkien Road to keep on evering on. Learn more at patreon.com/Tolkien Road. And hey, on YouTube, you can hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. Always love hearing from folks in response to these episodes, especially in the Silmarillion, letting us know what things stood out to you about this particular chapter. Let me also say on YouTube, if you want to support us financially, but you're not able to become an ongoing patron, one of the best ways to do that is to hit that thanks button that you see on YouTube. When you're watching us on YouTube, you hit that thanks button and you can make us a one-time donation. Honestly, you can do that. You could do that every month if you wanted to. Patreon, you get some cool perks along with it. We haven't really got that going yet on the YouTube side, but if you just want to give us a tip, say thanks for the episode, really enjoyed something, that's a great way to let us know. Send us your love, right? So, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's talk about the quote of the week, which is from this chapter. And here we go. To men, Morgoth feigned pity, if any would hearken to his messages, saying that their woes came only of their servitude to the rebel Noldor, but at the hands of the rightful lord of Middle-earth they would get honor and a just reward of valor, if they would leave rebellion. Yeah. So, we see more of this. How does Morgoth operate with respect to men now that they have arrived on the scene? Well, he's trying to basically manipulate them and harm whatever belief and hope they might have in the lords of the West, and ultimately in Iluvatar, and to make the case that he is the true lord of Middle-earth, of Arda, and that they should support him, and that he will, he'll be nice to them if they would just obey, right? So that's how Morgoth operates. So we'll see how that plays out over the course of the next several chapters. All right, well, let's dive into Chapter 18. So Chapter 18 concerns the Battle of Sudden Flame and the aftermath thereof. It sets in motion the action-packed final third of the Silmarillion, in which many of the great stories of the First Age occur. In other words, we've been setting the stage for the last several chapters, right? So ever since really the Darkening of Valinor, the Return of the Noldor, it's been kind of some stage setting for several chapters, and now these last 7 chapters are pretty action-packed. This is, I would say, the most action-packed part of the entire Silmarillion, right? It's interesting how it's structured. You kind of have a lot front-loaded, and then you have the most really back-loaded, right? So this is where you really want to sit up in your seat, pay attention, and there's going to be a lot of plot unfolding. So
yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. As with each episode, we won't be covering every detail of this chapter, but instead doing our best to hit the high points and unpack interesting and important details. If we missed something you guys want to discuss more, let us know. Our timeline. So where are we in the timeline? The history of Arda. We are in the years of the sun, 455 through 463. So this the events in this chapter cover about an 8-year period. And I'm getting that from the War of the Jewels, the volume 11 in the History of Middle Earth series, where it lays out a nice timetable for a lot of these events. All right, so Battle of Sudden Flame. So let's the chapter starts off discussing Fingolfin and basically saying, look, Fingolfin, who at this point is the High King of the Noldor, he's concerned that they need to proactively do something about Morgoth. Like, they need to actually proactively attack Morgoth, right? So, we've been having the Siege of Angband now for a long period of time. It's been pretty quiet. Beleriand has been enjoying a period of relative peace. And Fingolfin, as is wont to happen, I think, with people who find themselves in ultimate authority, is kind of always is like on his toes a little bit more than everybody else. Just thinking to himself, like, okay, no one else is going to be thinking about, should we proactively attack Morgoth? Right. It's going to be me, right?
Yeah, there's a burden of responsibility there.
This great burden of responsibility. And so he wants to, but he can't quite get the support that he needs in order to make it happen. So it turns out he's right. It turns out he's right that maybe they should have proactively attacked. And we see why just a little bit into this chapter with Battle of Sudden Flame. So let's read an account of this battle. Make my font a little larger there. All right. So we have 2 and a little more paragraphs. Greta, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll start.
All right.
There came a time of winter when night was dark and without moon, and the wide plain of Ardgalan stretched dim beneath the cold stars, from the hill forts of the Noldor to the feet of Thangorodrim. The watchfires burned low, and the guards were few on the plain. Few were waking in the camps of the horsemen of Hithlum. Then suddenly Morgoth sent forth great rivers of flame that ran down swifter than balrogs from Thangorodrim and poured over all the plain, and the mountains of iron belched forth fires of many poisonous hues, and the fume of them stank upon the air and was deadly. Thus Ardgalan perished, and fire devoured its grasses, and it became a burned and desolate waste, full of a choking dust, barren and lifeless. Thereafter its name was changed, and it was called Unfauglith, the gasping dust. Many charred bones had their roofless grave, for many of the Noldor perished in that burning, who were caught by the running flame and could not fly to the hills. The heights of Dorthonion and Arid Wethrin held back the fiery torrents, but their woods upon the slopes that looked towards Angband were all kindled, and the smoke wrought confusion among the defenders. Thus began the fourth of the great battles, Dagor Bragalach, the Battle of Sudden Flame.
In the front of that fire came Glaurung the Golden, father of dragons, in his full might, and in his train were Balrogs, and behind them came the black armies of the orcs, in multitudes such as the Noldor had never before seen or imagined. And they assaulted the fortresses of the Noldor, and broke the leaguer about Angband, and slew wherever they found them the Noldor and their allies, grey elves and men. Many of the stoutest of the foes of Morgoth were destroyed in the first days of that war, bewildered and dispersed and unable to muster their strength. War ceased not wholly ever again in Beleriand, but the Battle of Sudden Flame is held to have ended with the coming of spring, when the onslaught of Morgoth grew less. Thus ended the siege of Angband, and the foes of Morgoth were scattered and sundered, one from another. So this all brings to an end this period of relative peace. Let's look back at our map here. So of Beleriand. So on Fauglith, right? This was once Ardgalan, this plain upon which really the siege was conducted of. And we have up here just north of where it says on Fauglith. This is where where Angband is, right? So basically, we have up from the north these rivers of fire, and then behind them, Glaurung and the Balrogs and armies of orcs kind of pouring out. So this is like the Pearl Harbor, right? This is like the Pearl Harbor of Morgoth, of the Wars of Beleriand.
Sneak attack.
Yeah, big time sneak attack.
And fire just seems really unfair.
Well,
Like, I know Morgoth doesn't play fair, but I just feel like that was, I mean, that's basically like a volcano erupting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just does so much damage in such a short amount of time.
yeah, well, all's fair in love and war, as they say,
It's
right?
true. It's true.
Probably more so in war. I don't really know that the love part of that is actually true, but at least in the practice of war, that's how it tends to be. We also hear mention of Dorthonion, right, which is this region here that's kind of encircled in mountains and hills. And it's kind of this natural barrier to Angband, to Morgoth's efforts, and it's very fortunate that it exists here. Because you think about it, if this was not here, then it would be kind of this wide open area that Morgoth and his forces would have to get into the rest of Beleriand. But it really serves as like this just natural wall, right? Or at least a big speed bump, right? So we're going to find that, really there is a fortunate, just geographical situation that prevents this from Beleriand just being completely overrun all at once. And really Morgoth will have to deal, although this is kind of a victory for him, right? He will have to deal with how he gets through, getting his forces around Dorthonion into this western or eastern area here over in the Lothlon area, and also this very narrow pass, the Vale of Sirion right here, right, that he has to find a way through, and that's guarded by this Minas Tirith and Tol Sirion over here, and also Ithel Sirion on the west, guarding the land of Hithlam right here. So this name Anfauglith, I love that it means gasping dust. I just think to myself, like, it sounds like you're gasping on dust as you try to say Anfauglith, like that you're literally gasping on dust as you try to say it. So it's one of those words that I think Tolkien was like, this sounds like it should be, this just feels like it should be the name of this area.
Yeah. And what a terrible sensation.
Oh yeah.
To be gasping on dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, significant events of this battle. We have the emergence of Glaurung. Of course, we'd seen before. He had made an emergence many years ago, but had been kind of too young and upset Morgoth. And Morgoth said, "Back in your kennel," right? It's like, you're not ready yet. You're not ready for this yet. Right. All right. So, but now he appears to be ready. Deaths of Angrod and Agnor, right? So they are two of the sons of Finarfin, and so brothers of Galadriel and of Finrod. We have the death of Bregolis, the lord of the house of Beor, right? One thing to note, it mentions that there have been basically 6 generations since the arrival of men. I'm doing the math on that, and I'm not sure that quite all adds up. I didn't go deep into it, but in terms of the timeline that we have laid out, I'm not sure that much. I think of a generation as like normally 40 years and maybe like more like 20 years, but I don't know. Maybe there was an idea that they needed to repopulate, even more quickly, right? Reproduce even more quickly as men, because there was,
because of the threat and everything.
Because of the threat, right? Yeah. So
I thought it said just before there were 6 generations, but maybe I read that wrong. I mean, not that it makes a huge difference in the math.
Yeah.
When the 6th generation of men after Beor and Marach were not yet come to full manhood.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess they were there, but they weren't fully grown. Okay.
Yeah, and it actually says here, it being then 400 years and 50 and 5 and 50 since the coming of Fingolfin.
Yeah.
So yeah, 6th generation of men after Beor and Marach were not yet come to full manhood. So
the young.
Yeah. So
6th generation was young. So.
5.5 generations, maybe. But anyway. It just seems like it might be a little bit of a tight timeline for that, but anyway, no one said this was, again, this was not published by Tolkien in his lifetime, so he did not have a chance to work out all of the sticky details, and there are actually some other details. In fact, when we hear about Gil-galad in this chapter being the son, I believe, of who was it? Being the son of. Oh. Anyway, there's actually confusion. Again, something I'm not going to go into in this episode, but there is confusion about whose son Gil-galad actually is, right? Where he comes in terms of the generations of the Noldor. So, anyway, so we have the death of Angrad and Egnor, Bregolis, and then Hador the Golden-Haired, who's another great man, a great leader of the House of Men.
Who all die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Finrod is rescued by Barahir and swears an oath of abiding friendship and aid. Barahir will come to learn more of, and he is the father of Beren, who is the namesake, one of the namesakes of the next chapter of Beren and Luthien. So this will be something that recurs in that chapter, right? Something that comes back and is important in that chapter. All right. Next, we have Fingolfin. Well, he gets a little mad. He's a little perturbed.
Yeah, rightly so. I loved everything about this portion of the chapter.
Yeah.
Yes, I just like the description, the way it was written, like everything was my favorite part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so let's read it. Let's see, we've got again it's several paragraphs on this one, so maybe we'll just go back and forth on this one. I'll start out. Well, what do you want? You want me to start off or you?
Yeah, you go ahead.
All right. Thus he came alone, Fingolfin. Thus Fingolfin came alone to Angband's gates, and he sounded his horn, and smote once more upon the brazen doors, and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat. And Morgoth came.
That was the last time in those wars that he passed the doors of his stronghold, and it is said that he took not the challenge willingly, for though his might was greatest of all things in this world, alone of the valour he knew fear. But he could not now deny the challenge before the face of his captains, for the rocks rang with the shrill music of Fingolfin's horn, and his voice came keen and clear down into the depths of Angband. And Fingolfin named Morgoth Craven, the Lord of Slaves. Therefore Morgoth came, climbing slowly from his subterranean throne, and the rumour of his feet was like thunder underground. And he issued forth clad in black armour, and he stood before the king like a tower, iron-crowned, and his vast shield, sable emblazoned, cast a shadow over him like a storm cloud. But Fingolfin gleamed beneath it as a star, for his mail was overlaid with silver, and his blue shield was set with crystals, and he drew his sword, Ringel, that glittered like ice.
Then Morgoth hurled aloft Grond, the hammer of the underworld, and swung it down like a bolt of thunder. But Fingolfin sprang aside, and Grond rent a mighty pit in the earth, whence smoke and fire darted. Many times Morgoth essayed to smite him, and each time Fingolfin leaped away, as a lightning shoots from under a dark cloud. And he wounded Morgoth with 7 wounds, and 7 times Morgoth gave a cry of anguish, whereat the hosts of Angband fell upon their faces in dismay, and the cries echoed in the northlands.
But at the last the king grew weary, and Morgoth bore down his shield upon him. Thrice he was crushed to his knees, and thrice arose again, and bore up his broken shield and stricken helm. But the earth was all rent and pitted about him, and he stumbled and fell backward before the feet of Morgoth. And Morgoth set his foot upon his neck, and the weight of it was like a fallen hill. Yet with his last and desperate stroke Fingolfin hewed the foot with Ringel, and the blood gushed forth black and smoking, and filled the pits of Grond.
Thus died Fingolfin, high king of the Noldor, most proud and valiant of the elven kings of old. The orcs made no boast of that duel at the gate, neither do the elves sing of it, for their sorrow is too deep. Yet the tale of it is remembered still, for Thorondor, king of eagles, brought the tidings to Gondolin, and to Hithlum afar off. And Morgoth took the body of the elven king and broke it, and would cast it to his wolves. But Thorondor came hasting from his eyrie among the peaks of the Chrysaegrim, and he stooped upon Morgoth and marred his face. The rushing of the wings of Thorondor was like the noise of the winds of Manwë, and he seized the body in his mighty talons, and soaring suddenly above the darts of the orcs, he bore the king away. And he laid him upon a mountain top that looked from the north upon the hidden valley of Gondolin. And Turgon coming built a high cairn over his father. No orc dared ever after to pass over the mount of Fingolfin or draw nigh his tomb, until the doom of Gondolin was come and treachery was born among his kin. Morgoth went ever halt of 1 foot after that day, and the pain of his wounds could not be healed, and in his face was the scar that Thorondor made. Yeah, so I just wanted to show this image here. This is by Mentosic 8 on, and I found this over on deviant art. Let me see if I can. Yeah, Mentosic 8. So I will link to this image if you want to go check it out for yourself. Very, very cool image that kind of just shows, you know, I just really like this depiction, I guess I will say.
Yeah.
Notice that in this depiction, at least, and I don't think it mentioned in the text whether Morgoth wore his iron crown with the three Silmarils in it, but we see the three Silmarils depicted within the iron crown here. So I kind of find that, I wonder if he did, if he was like, well, I don't want to take the three Silmarils with me because then I might actually lose one or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But he may have, right? He may have. So, but anyway, I just think this is a great image that shows, like, you know, because you have to think, like, okay, this is Fingolfin. I mean, he's an elf, so he's not small, but he's going up against basically the greatest of the gods, right? The most powerful of the gods. This is probably not going to end well for him. And, you know, I think he handles himself as well as he possibly can.
Yeah.
But at some point, he's just fed up. It's kind of like a David and Goliath scene that ultimately goes the opposite way you want it to go. So,
yeah.
Unfortunately.
I wish this image, my only wish with this image is that it would make, I love that description of Fingolfin shining like a star. Like, I think that's, you know, just that whole idea of the light, you know, and the light trying to overcome the darkness. Anyway, that's my only thing. I wish Fingolfin was glowing a little bit.
I can see. I see what you're saying there. Yeah.
But I love, like, that's exactly how I pictured Morgoth for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a couple of notes on this battle. So Fingolfin dies. So High King of the Noldor. So the kingship of the Noldor passes to his son Fingon at this point. Morgoth, while he defeats Fingolfin, is nevertheless wounded. He's wounded. First of all, it sounds like as I understand it, Fingolfin hews off his foot, right? Completely, right? So I guess he has to have like a wooden leg or something like that. Like he's kind of hobbling around like a pirate at that point. I'm not sure, but we do see that, and also he is wounded by Thorondor the eagle, or Thorondor, and has a pretty bad wound on his face. You know, one of the themes here we find is that Morgoth, and this theme gets repeated over the course of really of the entire Legendarium. But Morgoth, you know, we tend to think that evil is, like too often we think in terms of good and evil being kind of dualistic, being paired together. But the truth is that evil only has so much to spend, right? Only has so much energy to spend. And it's a lot of energy. It can seem like a whole lot of energy at times. But there's only so much it can do. Only the good is truly infinite. And so with Morgoth, though he is the most powerful of all creatures, right? He is still a creature, and he's limited. He's finite. Whatever life and potency is in him is slowly diminishing, right? He's put much of his life and potency into creating evil works, right? His own evil twisted subcreations. And he is at a point now where he is, you know, capable of being attacked by, you know, and done battle with by a single elf, right? He still beats the elf. But
not as, you know, not as impressively as we may have expected.
Exactly. So
that's a good point.
Another thing that I will say is Grond is the name of his hammer. It's also the name of the battering ram used by the forces of Mordor in the War of the Ring. So when you hear the name Grond and the War of the Ring, when they're using the battering ram to break down the door of Minas Tirith, it is supposed to harken back to Morgoth's hammer, right? So there you go.
Nice little Easter egg there, Johnny.
Yep. All right. So with Fingolfin gone, we learned that that's just another kind of blow. So we had the Battle of Sudden Flame, the death of Fingolfin, and now we learn a little bit about what Sauron is up to in all of this. All right, so Sauron is, of course, Morgoth's chief lieutenant at this point, and Sauron leads an attack and drives Orodreth out of Minas Tirith of Tol Sirion. So, mentioning again Minas Tirith, this is not the same Minas Tirith of Lord of the Rings. This is the Minas Tirith that Minas Tirith is named after. Okay, so Minas Tirith is the I believe it means Tower of Watch. Let me double check that because it was originally the one in Lord of the Rings was originally named Minas Anor, which means the Tower of the Sun, I believe. And then when Minas Ithil was taken over, we no longer had the Tower of the Moon, so they renamed it the Tower of the Guard, I believe. Let's see, Minas Tirith, Tower of the Guard. Yes. And so, what is the Guard? What is the Guard that it is providing right now? Well, we can maybe zoom in a little here. All right, so here's Tol Sirion, the island upon which Minas Tirith is. We see that this very narrow pass, right, this Vale of Sirion here, okay, the forces of Morgoth want to find a way around Dorthonion, right? They're kind of slowly pushing back the forces of Dorthonion that reside here, but it's a very, very slow battle, right? It's a war of attrition here, and they're not making the gains that they want to make. So they try to go over here. They find difficulty over there, and Sauron's like, okay, let me see if I can take this pass right here, okay, and then if we can take this pass, then we can flood Beleriand with all of our forces. So Tol Sirion is the island in the middle of the Sirion River here, and then Minas Tirith is the tower of guard that stands upon it. And Sauron succeeds in his attack, driving out Orodreth. So let's read a description of what this tower becomes. But at length, after the fall of Fingolfin, Sauron, greatest and most terrible of the servants of Morgoth, who in the Sindarin tongue was named Gorthar, came against Orodreth, the warden of the tower upon Tol Sirion. Sauron was become now a sorcerer of dreadful power, master of shadows and of phantoms, foul in wisdom, cruel in strength, misshaping what he touched, twisting what he ruled, lord of werewolves. His dominion was torment. He took Minas Tirith by assault, for a dark cloud of fear fell upon those that defended it, and Orodreth was driven out and fled to Nargothrond. Then Sauron made it into a watchtower for Morgoth, a stronghold of evil and a menace. And the fair isle of Tol Sirion became accursed, and it was called Tol Ingauroth, the Isle of Werewolves. No living creature could pass through that veil that Sauron did not espy from the tower where he sat. Again, we're going to revisit this place in the next chapter. Sauron will play a significant role in that chapter, in that story. So, but it becomes this Isle of Werewolves now, right? So, very unpleasant sounding place.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now Morgoth is able to send his forces into the rest of Beleriand. There's been a lot of fighting at this point, so they may not be as strong as they initially were, and so there is that. We also have the fact that Doriath, right, the forces of Doriath, the forces of King Thingol, have not really been involved in any of this, and they are protected still by the magic of Melian, right? She's able to put kind of a protecting boundary around that region, and so it's not. And there are, the forces of the Noldor did manage to kind of fall back and regroup. So it's not like the forces of Morgoth can just pour in, and it's a very narrow pass there as well, right? So, it's not to the point yet where it's complete desperation and Beleriand is overrun, but it's not looking good for the Noldor either.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking as I was reading this chapter that people that enjoy like battle planning or like strategery when it comes to fight, if you like to play like war games or whatever, they would really enjoy this chapter.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of strategy.
Yeah,
as and stuff discussed.
So, yeah. It is interesting in that regard for sure.
And having that map really helps too.
Oh yeah,
because you can see how it all plays out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All
right. Well, next we jump ahead and we're going to read about the coming of the Easterlings, aka the swarthy men. The swarthy men. All right.
The swarthy men.
Yes. It is told, actually, Greta, do you want to read this? I just told it this time.
Oh, sure. It is told that at this time the swarthy men came first into Beleriand. Some were already secretly under the dominion of Morgoth and came at his call, but not all, for the rumor of Beleriand, of its lands and waters, of its wars and riches, went now far and wide, and the wandering feet of men were ever set westward in those days. These men were short and broad, long and strong in the arm. Their skins were swart or sallow, and their hair was dark, as were their eyes. Their houses were many, and some had greater liking for the dwarves of the mountains than for the elves. But Mithros, knowing the weakness of the Noldor and the Edain, whereas the pits of Angband seemed to hold store inexhaustible and ever renewed, made alliance with these new-come men, and gave his friendship to the greatest of their chieftains, Bor and Ulfang, and Morgoth was well content, for this was as he had designed. The sons of Bor were Borlak, and Borthond, and they followed Methros and Maglor, and cheated the hope of Morgoth, and were faithful. The sons of Ulfang the Black were Ulfast, and Ulwarth, and Uldor the Accursed, and they followed Caranthir, and swore allegiance to him, and proved faithless.
Yes. So two groups of men really enter this area in terms of being the Easterlings, right? We already have the Edain, the three houses of the Edain are kind of well established at this point, several generations into their existence in Beleriand. And Morgoth kind of is hopeful that the coming of these Easterlings will mean good things for him. And one of these groups, the people of Ulfang, those who follow Caranthir, end up being bad. Of course, Caranthir, I believe it's Curufin and Caranthir, we're going to find, are both pretty, of all the sons of Fëanor, they're kind of the most rotten. So not too surprising. And then we have Methros and Maglor, and the men who follow them, the Easterlings that follow them, are the sons of Bor, right? So
And they are faithful.
and they prove faithful. They prove to be good men. Yeah. I wanted to discuss real quickly a couple of the terms here. So swarthy and sallow, right? These are both terms that I certainly don't use very often. But
maybe we should.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know, because people get kind of, you got to be careful about what things, how you describe certain using certain terms these days, right? But let's look at what they actually mean. So this is from vocabulary.com. I'll link to both of these in the show notes. Because swarthy, it's an interesting word. It's kind of an ambiguous meaning. But I thought this was a good discussion of it. Swarthy means dark-skinned. If you like tall, dark, and handsome men, you find a swarthy complexion attractive. Not everyone with dark skin is swarthy. The word is usually used to describe someone whose skin is weather-beaten and darkened by the sun, or has an olive complexion. But the famous 19th century American poet Walt Whitman, who was of English and Dutch stock, seemed to be describing himself in his poem, "Behold this swarthy face, so swarthy may be in the eyes of the beholder." In terms of just kind of a dictionary definition, it's an adjective naturally having skin of a dark color, a smile on his swarthy face. And most of what I can find seems to indicate that it's a relative term, right? It has to do with, and it often has to do with having spent, like, it's not just the tone in terms of like the color and pigmentation of the skin necessarily, but it has to do with like kind of being weather beaten too. Maybe the look of having spent a lot of time in the sun. I can think about like going to the beach and seeing folks, maybe who like live at the beach and just spend a lot of time outside, and they've got what I would maybe, after hearing this term, call swarthy skin, right? Yeah. They are naturally I think would be probably classified as Caucasian if they lived in this country. In terms of having quote unquote white skin, but they've developed a swarthy complexion, right? A darker complexion because of having spent a lot of time in the sun, right?
Or maybe even farmers. I feel like maybe farmers would have kind of that swarthy look about them too. Again, just that idea of being in the sun, and having, making your living as in the outdoors. Maybe even construction workers, like people that spend a lot of time outdoors.
And it would seem to make sense if these, people had been wandering over, over a long period of time until they wound up here in Beleriand.
Yeah.
And if they came from maybe a more southeasterly region, it would make sense that they probably spent a lot more time under the sun, right? Under the kind of stronger rays of the sun, especially, as opposed to maybe the houses of the Edain that perhaps came from further north initially.
It's interesting. There's did you see this? There's some quotes from different works of literature here.
Yeah.
And one is from the Two Towers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's used, Tolkien uses swarthy.
Yep.
Again, it's also used in Jane Eyre.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it's not a term people use much nowadays,
right.
but at least not in my experience, but it is it does have a history going back a long way.
Yeah.
All right. And then sallow. What is sallow? Well, sallow means unhealthy in appearance, often yellow in color, and is almost invariably used to describe someone's complexion. His smile was as engaging as ever, but from his sallow complexion, I knew he was sick. Usually we say that when someone is sick, they turn green. You could also say their skin takes on a sallow look, and you'd mean the same thing. Sallow also describes the way someone looks if they have lost blood or are pale from fever. The word comes from Germanic roots meaning dusky or dirty.
Interesting.
And it simply means unhealthy looking, right? So... it's interesting here. Where does this come from? Try to find the actual reference.
Or it calls them sallow.
Yeah. Well, it says they're swart and sallow.
Swart or sallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long and strong in the arm. Their skins were swart or sallow. Yeah, there you go. So, that's what we're talking about here. It's not, It would seem to indicate that these terms have more to do not necessarily with kind of a natural skin tone, but kind of a relative look in terms of I don't know, just
lifestyle.
like lifestyle, like what's gone, what their history indicates, right?
Right.
The history of their living in this world, if you will.
And it makes sense, too, that they would maybe be a little sallow if they've been wandering, right? They're probably a little bit malnourished and, had to, be more physically active than maybe they have the nutrients to be.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump ahead a little bit and discuss Huor and Húrin. So Huor and Húrin are two of the Edain, two sons of the Edain. They are the sons of Galdor of Dor-lómin, and they, it just so happens that they are dwelling, that they go to battle, and they, in the midst of this battle, they get saved by Thorondor, right? So Thorondor, the Great Eagle, again, comes to help, and Thorondor is like, well, I guess I'll take him to Gondolin, right? So they become the first men to visit Gondolin. And they spend a year there, and to Maeglin's chagrin, Turgon lets them leave, right? Turgon lets them leave. So let's read a little bit about this. We'll start there.
But Huor and Huor desired to return to their own people and share in the wars and griefs that now beset them. And Húrin said to Turgon, Lord, we are but mortal men, and unlike the Eldar. They may endure for long years, awaiting battle with their enemies in some far distant day, but for us the time is short, and our hope and strength soon wither. Moreover, we did not find the road to Gondolin, and indeed we do not know surely where this city stands. For we were brought in fear and wonder by the high ways of the air, and in mercy our eyes were veiled. Then Turgon granted his prayer, and he said, By the way that you came, you have leave to depart, and if Thorondor is willing, I grieve at his parting, yet in a little while, as the Eldar account it, we may meet again.
But Maeglin, the king's sister son, who was mighty in Gondolin, grieved not at all at their going, though he begrudged them the favor of the king, for he had no love for any of the kindred of men. And he said to Húrin, The king's grace is greater than you know, and the law is become less stern than aforetime, or else no choice would be given you but to abide here to your life's end.
Then Húrin answered him, The king's grace is great indeed, but if our word is not enough, then we will swear oaths to you. And the brothers swore never to reveal the counsels of Turgon, and to keep secret all that they had seen in his realm. Then they took their leave, and the eagles coming bore them away by night, and set them down in Dorlomin before the dawn. Their kinsfolk rejoiced to see them, for messengers from Brethil had reported that they were lost, but they would not declare even to their father where they had been, save that they were rescued in the wilderness by the eagles that brought them home. But Galdor said, "Did you then dwell a year in the wild, or did the eagles house you in their eyries? But you found food and fine raiment, and return as young princes, not as waifs of the wood." And Húrin answered, "Be content that we have returned, for only under an oath of silence was this permitted." Then Galdor questioned them no more, but he and many others guessed at the truth. And in time the strange fortune of Húrin and Huor reached the ears of the servants of Morgoth.
Yeah, so why are they able to leave? Well, first of all, they don't know, because they were brought there by Thorondor. They don't know the way to Gondolin, right? Other than
fair.
an eagle picking you up and bringing you there, which no one has control over that, right?
And plus, it's that their eyes were veiled, right? So even if they wanted to figure it out, they couldn't have.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Ancient equivalent of throwing you in the trunk and on the way to the secret hideout.
Exactly.
All right, so I prefer the ancient way. Flying on an eagle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they get there and they spend a year. They learn a lot from Torgon, and then Torgon lets them leave and go home. Miglin is kind of like, well, I don't like them, so I'm glad they're leaving, but at the same time, it's like not really fair that they get to leave, right?
Is there more to that, do you think? Like, why is he so upset about that? Is it just because it's unfair and he does it have any, I guess what I'm asking is do you think it has any root in like it must, right? The tragedy that befell him and his mother and his father, right? Because his father wasn't allowed to leave.
I mean, I'm sure it's weird because I don't think Miglin really cared much for his father.
No.
And I don't know that he wanted to leave.
Yeah.
But I think Miglin is one of these individuals who is probably going to find fault with just about anything.
That's probably true. Yeah, that's fair.
I think he's always going to be looking for to bring fault upon those who especially those he considers as potential rivals, as less than him.
Yeah.
He's not always going to be up in your face about it, but he's going to find those things. He's just the type of person. There are people out there like this, way too many actually. They just want to probe at everything until they find your weakness, and that's what they exist to do. They're just like it's like they can't help it. They're just like, I'm going to find your weakness. I'm going to act like I'm just like a concerned, person and just want to know, but I'm always trying to find your weakness. And when I find your weakness, I'm going to exploit it. Right. Mm-hmm. I always got to watch out for those people. Right. I'm usually pretty good at picking up on people like that. But I think you're actually pretty good at that too. You normally just say somebody like that gives you the creeps, and I'm like, okay, I understand why. But I don't read this as any more than just Miglin saying, just trying to find,
looking to find fault. Yeah,
right?
Just looking, for reasons to be unhappy and to be at odds with others. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably true.
And he has his own. He's always scheming, right?
Right, he has his own ulterior motives for sure.
He wants that throne. He wants the throne of Gondolin ultimately for himself. So Húrin and Huor, we're going to learn a lot more about them and their offspring in the coming chapters as well. So see how this is setting the stage for these stories that follow, right? Mm-hmm. Húrin, of course, will be in the chapter, the main part. He'll show up in other chapters as well, but the main chapter that will be of his focus on his son, the story of his son, of Turin Turambar, and then Huor will be the chapter concerning Tuor and the fall of Gondolin, right? Tuor is his son. All right. And finally, Morgoth renews his assault, right? So the elves had regrouped and started to actually retake some of Morgoth's gains back from him. And Morgoth's like, I can't have that. So Morgoth renews his assault 7 years after the beginning of the Battle of Sudden Flame. And here's how that goes. When 7 years had passed since the fourth battle, Morgoth renewed his assault, and he sent a great force against Hithlum. The attack on the passes of the Shadowy Mountains was bitter. Pull up my map here. And in the siege of Eithel Sirion, Galdor the Tall, lord of Dorlomin, was slain by an arrow. That fortress he held on behalf of Fingon the High King, and in that same place his father Hador Lorindal died but a little time before. Húrin his son was then newly come to manhood, but he was great in strength both of mind and body, and he drove the orcs with heavy slaughter from arid Weathrin, and pursued them far across the sands of Anfauglith.
But King Fingon was hard put to it to hold back the army of Angband that came down from the north, and battle was joined upon the very plains of Hithlum. There Fingon was outnumbered, but the ships of Círdan sailed in great strength up the Firth of Drengst, and in the hour of need the elves of the Falas came upon the host of Morgoth from the west. Then the orcs broke and fled, and the Eldar had the victory, and their horsed archers pursued them even into the Iron Mountains.
Therefore Húrin son of Galdor ruled the house of Hador and Dorlomin, and served Fingon. Húrin was of less stature than his fathers, or his son after him, but he was tireless and enduring in body, lithe and swift after the manner of his mother's kin, Harith of the Haladin. His wife was Morwen Elithwin, daughter of Baragund of the house of Beor, she who fled from Dorthonion with Rian, daughter of Belegund, and Emeldir, the mother of Beren.
In that time also the outlaws of Dorthonion were destroyed, as is told hereafter, and Beren, son of Barahir, alone escaping came hardly into Doriath.
Yeah, so that would be the end of this chapter. So quick note, so what was this? So the assault was renewed upon Hithlum, right? This region to the west of the Anfauglith. The Ithel Sirion here is this tower, right? At the root, or at the I don't know what you call the beginning of the river, I forget. But here at the beginning of the river, and
mouth.
It's kind of the mouth. No, the mouth is the end.
Oh.
Right. So the mouth is down here. Mouths of Sirion.
Okay.
So we have the Ithel Sirion here, and there is a battle there, because it would seem this is one of the main passes to get into this region of Hithlum, right? And the people of Hithlum do a fairly decent job of holding back Morgoth's assault.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it ends on a fairly hopeful note.
Yeah.
Given all the death and destruction that preceded it. It's like, well, maybe there's hope after all.
Well, they are fighting the long defeat, right?
Exactly.
They're fighting the long defeat. So there are little bouts of hope, and the next chapter is going to be one of those, points of hope, right? Yeah. Points of hope. Mm-hmm. So for
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yep.
But don't worry, a lot more tragedy and bloodshed yet to come.
Just for balance, you got to keep it all balanced.
All right. So let's do any more thoughts on this chapter, Greta, before we do haiku?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Good. Yeah.
Let's do some haiku then.
All right, let's do it.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Boom.
Oh, man. All right.
You go first.
I go first. All right. Morgoth, Lord of Slaves, comes forth, a fearful victor, but with one less foot. Yeah.
Nice. I think the Lord of Slaves was a good insult from Fingolfin.
Oh, yeah. I think that's probably what put Morgoth over the edge. I feel like that was like, he was already bad, and then that was just like the final straw.
But wouldn't he want to be Lord of Slaves? Wouldn't he be like, yeah, I am Lord of Slaves. I got so many slaves, right? And they all got to do what I say, or I'm going to whoop them, right?
Well, yeah, maybe. That's probably true, actually.
I feel like evil people would
like
want
he would
that,
take
right?
that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know, though. Probably. Anyway, what I was going to say was I found it very interesting that that in that part it mentioned that Morgoth was the only Valar who knew fear.
Yeah.
I found that very interesting.
That is, I do remember that. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like he knows at this point that even though he wins, he's winning these things, his days are actually numbered.
And I think it goes back to what you were saying about evil, right? Like evil has an endpoint. There's only so much to go around, and he probably knows that he's waning because of that. So anyway.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you highlighted that. That's something we didn't mention in our discussion of the chapter, and that was a stark little note that stood out.
Yeah. There was also I was thinking too that Ulma was mentioned this chapter, which I thought was cool. I love it when the good Valar are mentioned.
Well, I feel like Ulmo is the one who's just like, he's always somewhere, he's not far from the people of Beleriand,
Yeah, I
right?
think that's true.
Because he is the Lord of Waters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
His dominion exists throughout all of Middle Earth, right? Whereas in the middle of the ocean, right, not all of the, I mean, I guess you can make the case that Manwë is there, but Aule would not seem to be. And I feel like Morgoth is at war particularly with Aule, right? Because Morgoth is always like in the earth, like wanting to make his own like weird creations and everything like that.
Yeah, and he's like making holes in the earth and everything like that too, like destroying it. Yeah. It also mentioned Manwë in this chapter. It mentioned that the eagle's wings, like the wind produced by the eagle's wings, was like the winds of Manwë.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Manwë and Ulmo feel like they are the ever-present Valar, right? They always have some. They always have their eye. They always are aware of what's going on everywhere in Middle Earth. Whereas Aule, maybe it's because it for that very reason that Morgoth is like especially intruding upon Aule's dominion, right?
Yeah.
Just even like think about how Aule or Morgoth, creates orcs, right, and all these other, kind of creatures that are sort of mockeries of the children of Ilúvatar, and just like Aule created the dwarves, but was because he submitted them to Ilúvatar, they were given a special grace of life, of their own.
Right. Yeah. It also just occurred to me too that when Fingolfin was riding to assault Morgoth, it compared him to, was it Osei?
That's no, Orome.
No, Orome. That's right.
Yeah.
Orome. And I thought that was cool too. It was almost like a battle of the Valar. Obviously Fingolfin is not a Valar, but he appeared as one in that moment just because of how he was, swiftly moving toward Morgoth, and maybe he was even glowing at that point too.
Perhaps.
I mean, perhaps. Yeah. Plus, he was decked out in lots of really cool, like mithril and like blue gemmed studded shield. Anyway, okay.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Good thoughts. All right, here's my haiku. Foe's fury of flame, let's fly, the fierce and the fell, Fingolfin fallen.
Ooh, that's really good.
Lots of F's.
Lots of F's. Yes. Very nice alliteration there.
Thank you.
Very good.
I like that one.
That was good.
All right, we have one from Red Hawk as well.
Oh, nice.
Eagles save great men, Húrin and Huor, of them first in Gondolin.
Oh, it kind of rhymes too.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that.
Very cool.
Very good.
Thanks, Red Hawk.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's about it for this episode. Hey, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. What are you waiting for? By the way, we got a. Let me pull this up real quick. We do have another one.
Ooh, a 5-star review?
A 5-star that, I need to read this. Let's see.
Please.
Got to put this down in my notes, but it just occurred to me.
Oh, no. I'm glad you remembered. I love 5-star reviews.
Well, don't we all?
Mm-hmm. We do. It's true. I'm not alone in that.
A lot better than those 1-star reviews, that's for sure.
Always. I mean, 5 stars are always better than 1 star, regardless.
Great show from Windsor Pulsar on June 13th. Great show. 5 stars, a wealth of knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
That's right.
I like it.
That's right.
Well done.
All right. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on, evering on, puts a smile on Greta's face. That's the most important thing. All right. And hey, drop us a line anywhere you can find us, and we will do our best to correspond with you. Easiest places these days are usually YouTube or Twitter, or you can email us, and I'll do my best to get back to you, but sometimes it takes me a little longer. All right. Thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R.,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Jacob Lockham,
John H.,
Scotchy Bobo,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T.,
Red Hawk,
Shannon S.,
Brian O.,
Emilio P.,
Zeke F.,
James A.,
James L.,
Chris L.,
Chuck F.,
Asia V.,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C.,
David of Pints with Jack,
Jonathan D.,
Eric S.,
Eric B.,
Johanna T.,
Mike M.,
Robert H.,
Paul D.,
Julia,
and Werty.
Matthew W.,
Keeps going. Joe Bagelman,
Chris K.,
Jacob S.,
and Don J.,
as well as those celebrating their Patreon anniversary this month, June of 2022, Teresa C.,
and James L.
Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you guys.
And thanks to everybody for watching and listening. We will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.